is for reproductive rights, for immigrants, for LGBT, for the economy. So yes, she represents the people.
If this is not a movement for the history books, I don't know what is. The way that she's galvanized voters across age, across race, across socioeconomic spectrum, and brought us all to Philadelphia tonight on the cusp of making history is truly amazing.
This campaign started in the most unconventional way. An election with plot twists which stretched credulity. And to finish, a Hollywood flourish.
God bless America.
Performances from Lady Gaga, Ricky Martin, and an address by Oprah Winfrey.
Every single vote, every one is going to matter.
Harris practiced as she preached, door knocking in Pennsylvania. Her chances could rest on how many women she can turn out, especially older and independent voters.
I'm a Republican. I am voting for Kamala because she stands for everything right, truth, justice, and I'm just so sick of the hatred.
They really do think that democracy is at a brink, and that would be devastating. And I'm also for women's rights.
Harris signed off in Philadelphia, the birthplace of the United States. In the coming hours, the people of this country will determine where it goes next. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Philadelphia.
Well, in the last hour, Donald Trump has held his final rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Our US correspondent James Matthews reports now on the Republican candidate's campaign for the White House.
We are approaching journey's end. For this political performer, last night was a late night curtain call.
This is the last one that we're going to have to do. And doing 4 of these in one day is a little difficult, but not really, because the love in every one of them has been incredible, just like this. So it makes it a lot easier.
This was earlier in Reading, Pennsylvania. It is a movement that Trump built. They've seen his rise, fall, and rise again.
In one word, what's the single most important issue for you in this election?
The border, safety.
Freedom.
Immigration. Life.
Or the economy.
Freedom.
Business.
It was a final day swing through the swing states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and to Grand Rapids in Michigan, where Donald Trump ended his previous campaigns. None had been as tumultuous as this.
Take over, Elijah. I love salt. Wait a minute, I spilled some.
Floating island of garbage. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
We're leading in every state. And I long to get the men who died.
This doesn't have the celebrity of the Harris campaign. It's an effort built around its central character. A central demographic is the young male voter.
We've been left behind.
Hatred.
They really do think that democracy is at a brink.
Oh, wait a minute, I spilled some.
Floating island of garbage. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
We're leading in every state. And I long to get the men who died.
This doesn't have the celebrity of the Harris campaign. It's an effort built around its central character. A central demographic is the young male voter.
We've been left behind. We've been kicked down, as Oliver Anthony put it, and are kicking us while we're down.
What he's done in the past has definitely been good for America, and you can't hold grudges on everybody for so long.
He can be a little bombastic at times, but I'm willing to give him a pass on that because of what he stands for.
Scholarships and job opportunities, so much less if you're white and Christian, because they will turn you down because of your skin color.
Number one.
The Donald Trump phenomenon has created this, a movement that's propelled him towards the verge of a second presidency. This is how US political history looks now. How it looks after today is the big uncertainty. Win or lose. James Matthews, Sky News, in Reading, Pennsylvania.
History is going to be made either way, whatever the result. If it's Donald Trump, first time a convicted felon will have been elected as president. If it's Kamala Harris, first time there'll be a female president in the White House.
Yeah, and the contrast between these two candidates really could not be greater. In the final hours of his campaign, Donald Trump telling his supporters that God saved him to save America. Kamala Harris telling her supporters that it's time to turn the page on the politics of hatred and division. If she makes it to the White House, it will be the culmination of an absolutely remarkable political journey. She went from district attorney in San Francisco to state attorney for California, only elected to the Senate in 2016. 2020 becomes the first female vice president of the United States, and now on the cusp of becoming the first female president of the United States. And for Donald Trump, it would be an equally remarkable comeback, because we know his 4-year term was absolutely littered with controversy, but this unfiltered approach he has, and we've heard it again in this final pitch, seems to resonate with so many people across this country, and that's why the polls are absolutely on a knife edge, neither of them leading by more than 1.7% in the 7 battleground states.
Yes, and it is on that knife edge. We know already, because Donald Trump has hinted at electoral fraud, and his supporters are saying that if he doesn't win, then something will have been amiss. And the consequences of that, who knows?
I think we can safely speculate that the outcome of this election is going to be contested in the courts either way, unless the polls are way out and one of them wins by a considerable distance. Donald Trump's campaign have already set aside $90 million for legal challenges. I think it's $14 million on the Harris campaign, so they're also preparing to contest it. But of course, Donald Trump has been alleging that the Democrats have stolen the White House for 4 years. He constantly peddles mistrust in the whole electoral system. And the real fear, I think, for law enforcement in the United States is how that might play out on the streets. They are concerned about chatter online from the far right, suggesting that they're going to contest the outcome by all means if Donald Trump doesn't win the White House back tonight.
Yes, and Donald Trump has never confirmed that he will accept the result if it is not in his favour. So we shall see. David, for the moment, thank you. Well, Lewis Goodall reports now on the route to victory in today's election.
We know that the US presidential election isn't about the raw number of votes you have. It is all about 270 votes, 270 electoral college votes. Each state of the union has a particular number of electoral college votes assigned to it on the basis of population. If you get over 270, then you win the election. It really is as simple as that. Let's have a look at what we think will happen in most of the states, because most of the states are safe for either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. You can see we've coloured them in there on the basis of the polling. We're pretty certain that most of these states will go this way. If it doesn't, then one or other of the candidates is having an incredible night. So there are 7 left remaining. These are the 7 swing states that you've heard so much about. Between them all, they're worth about 90 electoral college votes altogether. So we've got Georgia here down here, we've got North Carolina, we've got Pennsylvania, we've got Michigan, we've got Wisconsin, we've got Arizona, and we've got Nevada. These are the electoral battlegrounds, the arenas where this election will be fought, has been fought, and will be won and lost. On the basis of this, what can we say on the basis of the current polling? What can we say that we know? Well, we can't say a lot because the polling has been so close. The pollsters have been herding together, basically saying it's too tight. But there are a few states where one or other of Harris or Trump is a little bit further ahead. So, for example, in Georgia, Donald Trump is a bit further ahead than Kamala Harris. That's a state that Joe Biden won last time. First time a Democrat had done that in 30 years. Arizona, same thing. First time a Democrat had won it since 96, but Trump is back ahead there. Kamala Harris is ahead in Nevada, a state the Democrats have won in every election since 2008. And in Michigan, again, state that Donald Trump won back in 2016, but Kamala Harris is ahead. And that leaves Wisconsin, it leaves Pennsylvania, it leaves North Carolina. What are the paths then in that situation? You can see they're tantalizingly close to each other, 247 versus 246. There are 3 paths that would be available to them in that situation. And really so much attention has been paid, most of all, to Pennsylvania in the northeast of the United States. Why? Well, because it has more people living in it than either Wisconsin or North Carolina, or indeed any of the other swing states with 19 electoral college votes. So you can see that, let's, for the sake of argument, give that to Kamala Harris. Well, if she were to win Pennsylvania in this scenario, and it is just one scenario, there are loads of different possibilities. In this scenario, then she would only be 4 away from clinching that historic presidency. She would only need, for example, Wisconsin, she wins. She would only need North Carolina. Even if Donald Trump were to win North Carolina or won his state twice, then she would win. And we can reverse it as well, and we can see that if we give that to Donald Trump, then he would win. That is why so much attention has been paid to the state of Pennsylvania. On the night itself, it is almost certainly where this election will be won and lost.
Well, it is still the early hours of the morning here, 3 a.m., just after 3 a.m., but the results are already starting to come in, some declared. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris won 3 votes each in Dixville Notch, New Hampshire. The tiny New Hampshire village has a tradition dating back to 1960 for being the first in America to declare their votes. The town's 6 voters started to cast their ballots at midnight, and the vote count was completed 15 minutes later. Voters there have supported the Democratic nominee the last 2 presidential elections. David Blevins still with me, and we are still on that knife edge. It seems no clear water between the two.
But the polls were way out in 2016, way out in 2020, way out for the midterms in 2022. Gauging by that early result, they may be spot on this time because they are absolutely neck and neck. And that is why Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have been on the campaign trail to the dying hours of this campaign and will continue to campaign for votes in various forms today because, as Oprah Winfrey told the audience last night, every vote counts. And we're beginning to see, I think, why the United States has been so polarized for the last 12 years, I suppose, since Barack Obama was elected president. That's reflected in the result coming from that tiny village. People are divided on whether or not they want to move forward to politics of change or whether they want to go back to some kind of perceived lost America when they had anti-abortion and gun rights views for many more people. That's the dream that Donald Trump is talking about when he refers to the American dream. And really, this is a very polarized nation. And on the basis of that early result, I think we can safely speculate that whatever the outcome is tonight, it's going to remain polarized.
Yes, indeed. Very, very, very fine there. Kamala Harris winning 3 votes in Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, as has Donald Trump. That is the very latest. We'll have live coverage of the US election right here on Sky News. Here's a flavour of what's in store.
It's the final countdown. The wait is almost over. Americans have been casting their votes on who they want to be the next president of the United States. We'll bring you all the action as it unfolds in every state with our US correspondent, Mark Stone.
Concern right now if you're the Harris team?
Republicans do have an advantage in early vote numbers. When the early vote come in, it's going to look a little bit different than 2020, and that's scary.
So that is very interesting. Jim Messina with his take on the early vote so far. A couple things here we want to look back, all right? You've got a candidate on the ballot for the 3rd time at the national level. So what does the end vote look like? Does it look like 2016 where Trump squeaked out a win here over Hillary Clinton? He swept the blue wall, made it red, Southeast red as well. Or does this election look more like 4 years ago, okay? Here's Biden squeaking out a win over Donald Trump, okay? What did he do? He flipped that red wall, made it blue yet again, then a little bit of blue down here as well in the Southeast. Let's go to this right now because Madison was just talking about the early vote. This is what happened in 2020. You had just shy of 159 Americans voting, okay? So far, right now, okay, no pandemic, no COVID, no nothing. You're at 77 million, so you're just about half of the total that we expect in the end. And among those, now there's a category of others, you know, sometimes they register as independents, et cetera. But based on party, based on the states and early voting that report by party registration, Democrats make up 41% and Republicans make up 39%. This is one of these things that Messina was talking about in the soundbite. And this is one of the things that I'll cruise on back over here and we'll bring in our guests here today. This is one of the things that Republicans like to see right now in the early voting. We'll see how that shakes out once we add them all up there, Dana.
All right. Well, Harold Ford Jr. and Trey Gowdy are here with us, so no one better
Morning,
than
gents.
to shake that out for us. So your thoughts about that and maybe the concerns that Messina has.
So good morning. Glad to be with you. Election Eve, Trey and I haven't been on the ballot. We understand how election eves feel for candidates across the country. I think you said it well over there at the board. I think it's important for people to realize early voting, what it means for a lot of places around the country, and it really battleground states are where we're most focused. As I think about the closing and the closing arguments, I think both have probably, Trey was saying in the green room, would have probably liked to do it a little differently. However, I think she's been a little more disciplined. I think in the last 3 or 4 days, she's been a little tighter in her message, more concise in her message. But as you look at the map here and where she's going to spend the night, where she's going to spend the day and perhaps the evening, it's Pennsylvania. Without Pennsylvania, Democrats can't win. And frankly, I don't think Republicans can win either without it. So this will be the focus today over the next 24 hours. And I got to tell you, this is like Christmas Eve for me. I'm excited as I can
I
possibly
was saying. Washington Post headline, Harris's team claims she's no longer the underdog, but Trump team scoffs. Don't know if that's true in the end, but what about Harold's thoughts there, Trey?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Donald Trump, your closing argument should be twofold. Number one, you had 3 years to do whatever the next thing that comes out of your mouth is, and you didn't do it. And most Americans think our country's headed in the wrong direction. Instead, he spent the week explaining what someone else said at one of his rallies at Madison Square Garden. She, on the other hand, wants to be talking about turn the page. Joe Biden is not turning the page. He's the table of contents. He's the foreword to the book. And yet he uses the word garbage and she has to explain it. What I find fascinating about Pennsylvania is it's really a microcosm for the country. It's 2 urban centers with Texas in the middle. So who's going to win? It's no longer, I don't think, whatever the old political dynamic, it's now urban versus rural, and Pennsylvania, I think, proves that. Who can win, the cities or the rural area in between?
Here's something that is, I think that the Trump campaign would like to try to close on this one as well. They've been trying to define Harris for the last 100 days since she became the candidate. If you pull up call for number 3 here, these are the issues that Harris's team has declined to say whether she still supports. And it has everything from immigration and the Senate filibuster, the closing private for-profit prisons. She's called that morally wrong. She wants to install a climate envoy in every embassy around the world, et cetera. There's all of these things, Harold. And, you know, is that a reflection of the campaign being so truncated, so short, so she didn't have time to do that? Or does she not want people to know where she stands?
I don't know the answer to that, but I know this. If I were running against her, if I were Donald Trump, this is what I would have been talking about the entire time. I'm slightly surprised that President Trump is not closing at the border. I mean, I would have had the cameras there saying to the country, here's why I have to be president again to ensure that we get some reasonableness and sanity here. I think for President Trump, some of the undisciplined way he is closed has invited people or given people permission to think back about the things they didn't like about him 8 years ago. And the question is, do you want that in your living room? Do you want that in your dining room? Do you want that in your kitchen or your bedroom, wherever you consume television or media for that matter? And for her, I'm surprised that she didn't have to give a long-form interview. I'm surprised she didn't have to do more. I thought what she did with Brett, she did a good job. I would have done more if I were her. But we'll have an opportunity to say this Wednesday or Thursday. I think as we sit here today, she's in a good position. He's in a good position. It's interesting that he's going to spend as much time in Georgia that the Republicans are. I thought you would think that Georgia and North Carolina might be locked up, but in fact,
it seems like the play he's been running for the last 4 days is Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. Now, if you go to the board over there and add up electoral votes, that would be enough to get him back in the Oval Office. Just a couple things on that. If she wins, Trey, she would be the first candidate, certainly in the modern era, perhaps ever, who's never held a formal press conference. I don't know how you feel about that, but Nikki Haley went public. Here's her op-ed today. Trump isn't perfect, but he's the better choice. If you like his policies but are put off by his tone or excesses, consider the cost of the past 4 years. I don't know how you evaluate that, but Nikki Haley's weighed in twice now in the final 7 days.
Well, my first analysis is I never got in trouble for something I didn't say. So if you don't talk, it's hard to get in trouble. The problem with Kamala Harris is she has a voting record, and it was to the left of Bernie Sanders. I mean, very few Americans think death row inmates ought to be able to vote. Like maybe none. When I say very few, I mean none. But she did. So she either has to explain her change in position, which is always tough, or she has to just not talk. Donald Trump didn't participate in the primary debates. Katie Hobbs won in Arizona. I mean, I think it's on us as voters if we give people a free pass for not having to explain their positions. But both sides have done it in the past.
I hope it's a tradition that ends. I hope this is the last time that we allow the candidates to dictate to us, presidential candidates, when and how many debates they'll have. They should have 3 always, and they should split it up about the issues. But we'll have an opportunity to talk about
this. And Bill and Dana should moderate one of
them. Trey, with a Trump victory, however, have you given thought much to how it might be different from his first term?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't like it when I say this. I think 2016 caught them all by surprise. I'm not sure they were planning on winning. So vetting good cabinet. I mean, look at the number of original cabinet members that actually survived. So I know the folks running transition for him, they have been hard at work. I think you will see more closely vetted candidates. I think where he will get frustrated is the House is a slow-moving body. It starts all over again. So he may have an agenda, but the House takes a while to get cranked up. He's going to have to do it with executive action, which conservatives used to not like, but now they're okay with it.
It depends on the timing, right? Harold, any final last word?
I don't disagree with what Trey said about President Trump. I think Vice President Harris will have similar challenges. She has a little bit of an incumbency advantage. She'll be able to pick her team, but we got a long way before that.
And she'll likely have a Republican Senate to deal with.
Right, and hopefully a Democratic House. If not, if it's Republican House, Republican Senate, the country may like it because it'll slow things down, but it may frustrate her if she's president.
Get your sleep.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks so good to have you here. Counting the votes in Arizona tomorrow night could turn into a marathon, all thanks to a ballot in Maricopa County that is unusually long. Tell us more. Alicia Acuna, she's there in Phoenix with the story. Hi, Alicia.
Hi, Dana. I spoke with a Maricopa County elections official who told me that the county is already, quote, backed up as it processes the early mail-in ballot here, and in large part that's because of the county's long ballot. It is 2 pages, double-sided, with an average of 79 different contests. It's twice as long as most years, so taking the pages out of the envelopes is double the time. This could impact voters in 2 ways. First, it's likely going to delay fuller results we historically see here in the hour after the polls close. We will still be able to report early results, but only a percentage as they catch up. Maricopa County says they are working 24/7 and have added shifts. And second, a long ballot can equal long lines on Election Day. We talked to a couple of people who said it took them about an hour.
It definitely took more time, and I felt like I did have to spend more time going into depth on everything on the ballot.
Are you concerned about the lines on Tuesday, people waiting while other people are filling out that long ballot?
I am concerned. Ease of voting has always been a concern for me, so I think, the whole system needs to be reframed and really thought about to make voting easier for everybody, because it is a struggle here.
Maricopa County is a must-win in this state, and elections officials here say it could take between 10 and 13 days for the final tally. Dana, some people will remember we were standing here in 2020 and 2022. It felt like for days on end. It has to do with the election laws here and the order in which the ballots are allowed to be counted. So we're trying to establish kind of a level set for expectations because, again, Arizona is going to Arizona. So we're all just going to have to settle in. Dana.
Come on, Arizona.
Let's go.
Figure it out. Thanks, Alicia.
Saying his name endlessly on the campaign trail.
Donald Trump, 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 Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris is apparently done talking about Donald Trump. The Veep did not mention Trump by name at her Michigan rally last night for the first time as a candidate. And her campaign says it's intentional because they want to, quote, close fully positive. So instead, Kamala is letting her allies do the dirty work. Nancy Pelosi is making crazy comments about Donald Trump's fitness for office.
the ex-president just said is further indication of his cognitive degeneration. You saw recently when he was talking about whether he chose electrocution or being eaten by sharks. Something's very wrong there. And indicative in it also is diminishing the power of the press, which is the guardian of our freedom in our country. So I think people who might thinking about voting for him have to know that he can't last as president for 4 years with his brain deteriorating at the rate that it is, and it's clearly evident.
Jesse, how is that even a talking point? Is her brain deteriorating?
So I sometimes think we're going to get along if Trump wins. And then I look at her and I think, oh, no. They're going to impeach him if they win the House. And the House is a coin toss. Trump could have 6+ Senate seats in the Senate. And then if he loses the House, where's the Trump agenda? So they're going to investigate him. They're going to impeach him. They're going to go into these intelligence committee rooms and they're going to come out and leak God knows what this time. And so it's going to throttle everything this country is trying to do. If he gets in this White House with a mandate to heal the country, fix the economy, and close the border, and Nancy's standing in the way because of some personal agenda, then I think the only thing that you can do is investigate her for insider trading. You look at the Visa stock, you look at Pauly P. and the pillow talk, and I don't think that would be considered revenge. I think that would be considered accountability. And it's something she should think about.
Yes.
And that's not a threat. That's just what people are saying.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing that with us. You know, Dana, she stops mentioning Trump's name. Now she's saying the guy before me. I mean, does she really have anything else to talk about?
Let's remind everybody how this happened. How do you know she stopped saying his name? Because her staff made sure to tell all the reporters to make sure you notice that she stopped saying his name. What did that follow? Well, Future Forward, the PAC that is supporting her, is not allowed to directly communicate with her. And they were sending smoke signals through the New York Times that their direction of going after Trump all the time and calling him a fascist was not working. And the Kamala Harris people would send back through the New York Times reporter, we think it is working. I'm telling you, it's not working. And they're telling us through the newspaper. And then all of a sudden they say, oh, now she's not talking about him anymore, and she wants to end positively. This is not something she decided. This is something that they finally realized that Future Forward was correct. Not only did she not mention Trump, she did not mention an economic plan. She did not mention how to actually secure a border. She did not mention how to support Israel in what looks like World War III. She did not mention a plan for inflation or a plan for energy that we talked about yesterday. She's not mentioning anything. It's a cotton candy closing.
All right, Jessica, you know, she keeps saying we aren't going back, except Americans and thinking and looking back, remember things were better 5-6 years ago, and they also think the country's going the wrong direction. But she really does want to look back because she wants to go back to Roe versus Wade. How's that for
Well, a lot of people want to go back to those protections, and that might be the Republicans' undoing tomorrow when people go to the polls. Jesse?
It could be. What do I know?
Very little.
Walked right into that one.
Totally. Open door.
Just like your border policy. Ooh, walked right back into that one.
I feel like I'm on an episode
You're like
of
that
Friends.
guy on the hill, jumping back.
Saquon, got her.
Okay. I feel like the way that you guys are talking about her indicates that this campaign is not just being responsive to intel that they're getting, and that's actually how you can end up being successful.
No, she says she's not going back. What is she not going back to?
I just told you. She's not going, we're not going back to when Donald Trump was president. We're not going back to the chaos of it. He was unfit to be president. Those things actually do resonate.
To 2 years ago?
She is right now +10 on bringing the country together. That comes from somewhere. She's +9 on looking out for the middle class. These are all things that can help her on election day when you have a double hater, for instance, that shows up at the polls and says, you know what, I think Kamala Harris actually cares about people like me, whereas I think Donald Trump cares about the interests of people like him, i.e. rich people.
Dude,
so
gross.
I hate the rich until I become one of them, and then I'm going to love them so much. I just think that they are doing the absolute best that they can with the information that they have. And again, that the Republican side would probably be happier if Donald Trump was closing on his economic message. You say, I don't know what Kamala stands for. Watch her closing ad. It leads with, the price gouging, going after that, lowering prescription drug prices, protecting your Social Security and your Medicare. Those are all strong messages that are motivating voters.
Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I don't think you can compare the campaigns because Trump's campaign was much longer. Longest in the
Never
history.
ending.
The longest in history. Kamala was lucky. She only had to do it for 60 days and barely showed up. I learned a lot in this segment. I didn't know any of that stuff. And I was like, I got nothing to add. Although I will add this. The real closing argument to me is one of extortion. It's got that feeling that if Trump wins, we will scream and cry and burn and riot, just like we did in 2016 for 3 years. And I do think that has an effect on people. It has an effect like, geez, I really don't care that much about who wins. I just want to be left alone. And I don't want people yelling. I don't want protests. So you know what? I think that's the strongest argument for Kamala Harris is that there's an ambivalent portion of society that just doesn't want to be harassed by liberals. And so the liberals are going to be screaming and saying it's on you if she loses. So it's like, fine, whatever. I'll vote the crazy lady in.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. What happened? There was blood pouring everywhere, and yet, in a certain way, I felt very safe because I had God on my side. I felt that. In our Puerto Rican community more than I do. Nobody.
Just his comment last night about garbage.
Listen, I think that, first of all, he clarified his comments, but let me be clear, I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Who Donald Trump is? He is the person who stood at this very spot nearly 4 years ago and sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol to overturn the will of the people in a free and fair election.
Pictures from Pittsburgh, where Vice President Harris is about to take the stage on the final night of the campaign. Former President Trump also about to address his supporters, also in Pittsburgh. It's a must-win state for them both. That's why they're there tonight. And tonight, in the final installment of our Voters Out Front series before Election Day, Danny Freeman talks to the voters who could tip the scale. And Danny is out front.
I'm feeling excited that it's here. I'm ready to move on.
While Debbie Gable is tired of the ads and the campaigning that have flooded Pennsylvania, the Democrat is hopeful for a win for Vice President Kamala Harris.
A lot of young people that I know are kind of energized in a way that, seems really exciting. So that I find encouraging, that I feel like people are becoming more aware that they need to engage.
But Republican Kim Moyer sees it differently.
I think it's going to be a landslide. I really do.
For
Trump.
You think Trump's going to take Pennsylvania in a landslide?
I do.
And there was no chance the abortion rights opponent from Schuylkill County was voting for Harris.
I can understand why people want to vote for a woman, but if she was anything that she says she is, she would have done it already. She had 4 years.
President Joe Biden edged out former President Trump in Pennsylvania by about 80,000 votes in 2020. But the latest CNN poll of polls shows the state dead even.
We are small business owners. We've owned a restaurant in Lidditz for 30 years. And obviously the food inflation affects our business.
Republicans Don Quinn and Tim Hepler feel Trump is the only way forward. Does any of the former president's rhetoric give you pause?
I wish he could use some better words sometimes, but again, it's not a personality contest. It's President of the United States, and it's all about the issues.
Democrat Deb Rohr mailed in her ballot early for Harris.
The norms and the decency and just the civility is really, it's just getting out of hand. And I think the rhetoric from Donald Trump is making it worse.
And despite former President Trump promoting unfounded claims of fraud these past few days, she's confident in the election system here.
I think our elected officials have told us the truth, that it's fair and secure. Again, it's just some folks trying to, sow doubt, but I have every confidence that it'll be free and fair.
And even at this late hour, there are still voters who are still undecided, like independent Philip Whitted.
I'm going to do some more research tonight and pray on it, man. And I don't want to sway anybody either way. I think both candidates are great. I think
you like both candidates?
I do, actually.
Philip said he'll make up his mind in the ballot box.
I have the decision by the time I have coffee in the morning.
Now, Aaron, we're in Lancaster County. Make no mistake, this is a red county. Former President Trump won it twice, both in 2016 and 2020. But the demographics here have been changing over the years. And while former President Trump will almost definitely win this county again, Democrats have been trying to compete here. So I'll be looking at the margins because it may give us insight into just how close this election will be in the Commonwealth. Aaron?
All right, Danny, thank you very much. The margins in those counties could say it all early. We'll see what they show us.
Is now senior Harris campaign advisor and former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. Also CNN political commentators Kate Bedingfield, Alyssa Farrar Griffin, and David Urban. Alyssa, you look at the map. Where's your head at?
The reality is we don't know. This is a historically tight race, and the dynamics of it, just to put this historical moment into context, this is a former president who lost, who tried to steal an election, who was convicted on 34 felony counts, but who has somehow clung to power and had the strongest hold on the GOP that I'd argue anyone has had in 20 years. Donald Trump is someone I never sleep on. I've seen him come back from things no other political figure could. That said, he's coming against his own self-induced headwinds. He's had a terrible closing message. He's been undisciplined, and we know that late breakers tune in the final stretch. Juxtapose that to Kamala Harris, who has been doing the groundwork on the groundwork, but she's also delivering a coherent message. She's not talking about him. She's talking about a future-looking vision. She's talking about what she's going to do as president. I think the momentum is behind her, but I genuinely wouldn't be surprised by either outcome in this race.
I think if you look, so I agree with a lot of what Alyssa said, and I think if you look at the data, which, we don't know how much the early vote data is really telling us about what's going to happen, because 2020 was obviously an unprecedented year. We were in a pandemic. Democrats were voting by mail in huge numbers. And this year you've had Trump telling his supporters to go out and vote early. So who knows how much of the Republican turnout right now is actually cannibalizing their election day vote. We don't know that. But if you look at the gender gap in these early numbers, I think there is reason to believe that the Harris message, particularly in a post-Dobbs America, is registering with frankly, the suburban voters John King was just talking about, who will ultimately have to put her over the top. So we don't know, because we don't know what turnout's going to look like tomorrow. But I think there are certainly indicators, particularly this gender gap in the early vote, that are a good sign. Is a good sign for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, we feel good. We're optimistic. We've always said that this was going to be a close campaign, and the polls are bearing that out. But I can tell you, Anderson, I've never seen a candidate close more poorly than Donald Trump, from dog catcher to city council member. This is the worst I've ever seen a candidate close. And you look at the vice president, she's closing strong. She's very positive about her message, reminding the American people what's on her to-do list, how she's going to deliver on the economy, how she's going to make life better with those kitchen table issues. And then we have Dobbs that's still hanging out there. Women are very unhappy with Donald Trump, and he's taking credit for that Dobbs decision, and women especially, are going to remember that.
David, I mean, are you optimistic? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of feeling that...
It feels like 1, 2, 3.
So please mansplain.
So listen, I think that's...
Do you think the Trump campaign is finishing strong?
I think right now, tonight, in the city of Pittsburgh, my hometown, right, you have Sarah Huckabee Sanders there, you have Tulsi Gabbard gave a good speech. You have Megyn Kelly there.
I'm talking about Donald Trump.
No, listen.
I know you got all these others.
He's finishing strong. In the front row, you have San Juan's. You have Roberto Clemente Jr. San Juan. Roberto Clemente is a revered figure in the city of Philadelphia. I think in the city of Pittsburgh and in Puerto Rico. Right. He's one of the iconic figures in baseball history. He's there to endorse Donald Trump tonight. I'm hoping that I'm not watching it right now, but I'm hoping Donald Trump is sticking to the script that she was talking about. Right?
Have you been surprised? I want to show this thing Friday because I missed it yesterday. This is Trump complaining about his microphone Friday night.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think the mic stinks. Do you want to see me knock the hell out of people backstage? I get so angry, I'm up here seething. I'm seething. I'm working my ass off with this stupid mic. With a decent... Way too low.
Yeah, you didn't like the mic placement clearly, right? So you kind of went on a rant. But listen, to the mayor's point, like, Americans are reminded that that 75% of Americans feel that we're on the wrong track, right? Wrong track. Kamala Harris, she says a to-do list. She's had it for 4 years. Why hasn't she been working on it for the past 4 years? That's what Americans are thinking. Americans are thinking, like, you're going to start on day one? Well, what have you been doing, Madam Vice President? If you're one of the most powerful people in the room, the loudest voice, you're either super powerful and effective or you're a non-entity. You can't have it both ways. And so I think a lot of Americans are saying, like, what have you been doing, right? And then to the vote total that Kate's talking about, at this point in time, in 2020, we're in the pandemic and lots more people voted, right? But at this point in time, in 2020, Joe Biden had already banked 1.4 million votes against Donald Trump in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We know because the ballots, what's been turned in, what's been requested, what's been turned in, it is far short of that. So I ask Kate, I ask the mayor, I ask any Democrat to tell me, where is Kamala Harris going to make up those votes? Not with the Jewish community.
But those numbers only hold if the 2020 model is accurate. And we don't know. We don't know what turnout's going to look like. So yes, of course you can make assumptions. You can look at the data that you have available and try to divine where it's going. But until you know the total turnout, you can't know.
Let me ask this question.
You asked a question.
And we talked about this a minute ago, but you also don't know how many of those Republican voters would have come out and voted on Election Day. So we can't know with certainty that any Republican who's cast their early vote isn't a vote that in 2020 was being cast on Election Day. So
we do know, Republicans do know a little bit. We know there's about 40% of those are first time, they're 4-4 voters, people who haven't shown up before, new people. I just asked the question, is Kamala Harris, and anybody in America can answer this, is she more popular than Barack Obama in 2008? Is she more popular than Joe Biden in 2020? Because if she isn't, she's going to lose in Pennsylvania.
But she's running against Donald Trump.
But I do think that this is it, is that Donald Trump has hit his ceiling. I really believe this, and something is happening with women. This is anecdotal, but I heard from a 70-year-old woman who said, I haven't voted for a Democrat since Carter, but I voted for Kamala Harris. Even if you're not somebody where reproductive freedom is your leading value, you always lived in a world where you had options, you had choice. And then juxtaposed with a closing message that just shows character, that is not what you want your kids to look up to. He is bleeding the very votes needed, and she's got a 15-point lead with women.
In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, abortion is 23 weeks. You got a Democratic governor, Democratic
But
legislature.
people vote beyond their state.
Okay, but you also have a lot of women in the state of Pennsylvania, I've heard from, that feel that Title IX's been gutted by this administration. They're pissed off. They want their daughters to be able to go to college on sports. They don't want boys in the locker room. A lot of women are upset about that as well.
Well, let me tell you, in 2020, I quoted the great poet Andre 3000. I said, the South's got something to say. This year, women have something to say. And the great thing is that the vice president is not just focusing on women, she's focusing on Americans. So you've got women who are energized across this country. You've got young people who have their to-do list as well, who want to see things move in a direction that's going to make life better for them. Donald Trump's not offering that to anyone in this country. He's not talking about $25,000 in a down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. He's not talking about $6,000 credit towards families who are having children for the first time. He's talking about microphones. That's not a great
all he's
close.
doing to the microphones. My lead source tonight is the independent senator from Vermont who's been out campaigning for Vice President Harris. Senator Bernie Sanders joins us now. Senator, I mean, the only thing that everyone can talk about is what's going to happen tomorrow. It's obviously an incredibly tight race based on the polling that we've seen. What is your sense of what we're going to see happen tomorrow?
I can't tell you anything different than you already know. It's going to be a very, very close race. And for all of those people out there who believe in democracy, who believe in women's rights, who believe that climate change is real and not a hoax, don't sit it out. You may disagree with Kamala Harris on this or that issue, but it's absolutely imperative that we get out and vote, bring our friends out and vote, and we win this thing and make Kamala our next president.
Well, you just said, don't sit it out. Certainly, we've heard from some people who are considering doing so. And, when you look at some of these swing states that are going to be deciding what's happening tomorrow night, there are still third-party candidates on the ballot in some of these. Trump, just a few moments ago, was saying Jill Stein is a candidate he's never met, but he loves her as a politician. I mean, what would you say to voters who are considering casting their ballots for maybe a third-party candidate?
Look, I understand there are a lot of people, including myself, who strongly disagree with Biden and Harris over Israel and Gaza. And in fact, when Congress reconvenes, I'm going to be introducing a resolution to stop all U.S. arms sales to the right-wing extremist Netanyahu government that is causing massive, unbelievable humanitarian disasters in Gaza right now. So I disagree with them on that. But what you have to understand is that even on that issue, Trump and the Republicans are far worse. While children right now in Gaza, as we speak, are starving, we cannot get Republicans to support humanitarian aid to feed starving children. That's how bad that is. And with Harris as president, I think we have a much, much better chance of changing U.S. policy toward the Netanyahu government and stopping this war and getting humanitarian aid in there. But Gaza is not the only issue, as important as that is. If you believe, as most Americans do, that women have a constitutional right to control their own bodies, you got to vote for Kamala. If you believe that climate change is real and an existential threat to our country and the world, you got to vote for Kamala because Trump thinks it is a hoax. And by the way, this is an issue that has not been talked enough about in this campaign. If Trump wins, the struggle, the global struggle against climate change is over. Because if the largest economy in the world, the United States, pulls back, so will China, so will Europe, and God only knows the kind of world that our kids and grandchildren will be living in because of climate change.
Yeah.
And if you believe in income and wealth inequality and dealing with that, Trump wants to give tax breaks to billionaires. So you got to come out and vote, even if you don't agree with everything that Kamala is doing.
Well, and on the environmental piece, I've heard Trump already has regulations lined up that they would reverse if he does take office. Obviously, we'll see what happens tomorrow. But just going into tomorrow, given how tight it is and that this could historically be one of the closest races we've ever seen, we don't know. Is there any one thing, Senator, that you're keeping your eye on starting tomorrow?
Well, look, I mean, we all know there are, 8 or 9 battleground states. There was recently a poll in Iowa, which some people hope is real and is emblematic of what may be happening, that a lot of older women, for example, are just disgusted with Trump's rhetoric and his hatred, and maybe in large numbers will be voting for Kamala. But bottom line is that this is the most consequential election in our lifetimes, and we've got to bring out as many people as we can to see that Kamala wins.
I want you to listen to something that former Congresswoman Liz Cheney had to say today about tomorrow's outcome.
I think everybody across this country has to be aware that the Trump campaign has already begun pushing notions about rigged elections, stolen elections, fraudulent claims. Everybody's got to be aware that they're going to do it. We're in a much better place at the local level to help defend against those fraudulent claims, but people just need to be aware that it's happening. And look, you're going to see Donald Trump continue to melt down.
What happens if Donald Trump does come out and declare a victory that's not his and may not ever be his?
It's not what if. Caitlin, it is not what if he will.
You think it's inevitable?
Everybody should be aware. Of course it will. So he will announce early tomorrow that I have heard from all over the country, from Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, we have won. And the only way we could possibly lose is if there is voter fraud. That is what will happen. And I think, we've got to be, this is why he has got to lose, because this is exactly how you undermine democracy. The only way I can lose is if there is fraud. Well, that means you can't lose a legitimate election. He has got to be defeated, but we have to be prepared for that. And sadly, there are many of his supporters who do believe that. But this is one of the reasons why Trump must be defeated, because of that constant attack on the rule of law and the attempt to undermine American democracy.
But are you worried about not just his supporters, but local election officials and people who are prepared who agree with him, that they think there's no way he can lose this election unless there is fraud, even if there's no evidence of it and none exists? I mean, what happens then if we find ourselves in a situation where local elections boards are refusing to certify the vote?
Well, you're going to have, believe me, the Democrats have many, many very good lawyers, and you're going to have to fight this thing out as best we can. But this is why this election is so unique and so unprecedented, because you have a candidate who right now, I'm sure, is telling his supporters that there's no way he can lose this election.
No matter who wins, there are going to be tens of millions of Americans who will be unhappy with the result. I mean, just judging by how split it is right now. And, each side describes the other as kind of a threat to the country's existence. Obviously, Harris and her team say he's a threat to democracy, and you just mentioned the rule of law. Trump claims the country won't exist anymore if she's reelected, that there's going to be World War III. Obviously, two very different arguments. But what do you say to people who are not going to be happy with the result, regardless of which way it goes?
Well, this is what I say, not to people. I say to the Democratic Party. The truth is, this should not be a close election. Trump has been found guilty of 34 felonies, guilty of sexual abuse. He has been impeached twice. He had 4,000 lawsuits against him when he was a private businessman. This should not be a close election. And I think the Democrats, win or lose, have got to take a very hard look at themselves and ask how it could be that a significant majority of working class people in this country are prepared to vote for Donald Trump. And the truth is, what has got to happen is the Democrats have got to wake up and say, you know what? Instead of worrying about big money interests and campaign contributions from billionaires, we got to stand with the working class of this country. And we need an agenda that is a popular agenda that speaks to Democrats and Republicans. Caitlin, you go out there, you talk to Republicans and Democrats, and you say, you think we live in a democracy when billionaires are spending billions of dollars on the federal election? Is that really what a democracy is about? Or do we got to get big money out of politics? Democrats, Republicans, both will tell you the same thing. Ask people whether we should give tax breaks to billionaires. They don't agree with that either. There are a lot of issues that can bring people together, and the Democrats are going to start having to fight for those issues and regain the confidence of a working class, which they have lost.
A good hard look, as you put it. Senator Bernie Sanders, we'll have you back to talk about that after the election. Thank you for joining us.
For the U.S. presidency have been making their final pitches of the campaign in key swing states. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate, held her last rally in Pennsylvania. Tens of thousands of supporters gathered outside the Philadelphia Museum of Art for a star-studded concert featuring Lady Gaga and Katy Perry, among others. Republican candidate, former President Donald Trump, held a rally in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, before heading to Grand Rapids in Michigan, another battleground state, where he is right now giving his final address to supporters. And with polls about to open, it's now down to U.S. voters to choose the political direction of their country for the next 4 years.
Are we ready to do this? The drive to get voters to the polls did not let up until the final moment. Vice President Kamala Harris fired up a crowd in Pennsylvania as Election Day neared.
But what you all are signing up to do today and what you've been doing, let's enjoy it. And I know you do. I can feel the mood in here because it's the best of who we are as a democracy.
Her rival Donald Trump also marked Election Eve with a competing rally in Pennsylvania.
You built this country, I have to tell you, you built this country. You're going to save this country, too. You're going to save it. Because, if we win Pennsylvania, not me, if we win Pennsylvania, we win the whole ball of wax. It's over.
Back in D.C., Howard University prepares to host Harris on election night, where she will wait for the results.
It means a lot because it's just super inspiring to us as students to see what we can become, because this is her alma mater, and also to see that she hasn't forgotten where she's come from.
Her being a black woman president would be monumental, not only for Howard, but for the country as well, and I'm really looking forward to it.
As preparations unfolded in D.C., security ramped up in Florida near Mar-a-Lago, where Trump will await results on election night. His supporters were out on the streets marking Election Eve.
We're here to support Donald J. Trump, so we're here, ready to go.
Economy is terrible right now. We have an immigration crisis going on, and me personally, I don't think we can afford to live another 4 years under the current administration.
With the final hours ticking down, the outcome now rests with the voters.
We're now joined by political analyst Liz Schulke in Baltimore, Maryland. Liz, how would you sum up what Kamala Harris's pitch to voters has been through this entire campaign?
Throughout the entire campaign, her pitch has been, in part, a rebuttal to Trump, saying one of her most famous taglines is, "We will not go back," reminding people of the dangers and the wreck that she sees that it caused the first Trump administration, but decidedly different from Biden and, in general, any other candidate. Her message has been one of joy. You heard that just in the clip. Let's enjoy this. And I think she tapped into an ethos that the country was feeling in general this summer with concerts and the Olympics, and now her campaign of a need to feel joyful about civic participation again.
But is the country necessarily feeling joyful? I mean, some of the issues that keep coming up are the cost of living and immigration, for instance.
Absolutely, and I think that's what you hear in the Trump campaign. He's really driving home how horrible everything is. He's talking about how things are ruined, how cities are bad, how you can't afford to live. And that's a very real feeling in America as well. We have come out of the pandemic with inflation that's finally getting under control, but folks are still feeling it at the grocery store. And so it is very much an antithesis to the Harris campaign of things are really bad and people are struggling. And I think it leaves the American people feeling both ways and a lot of anxiety.
Is this a clash of policy versus perception, and perception ultimately being slightly hard to ignore?
I would say that's the defining feature of the entire Biden administration, is that he has had a very effective and good presidency for Americans' bottom line. It's one of the only countries that avoided a recession after the pandemic. Jobs are up, inflation is down, and yet people just don't feel it. And whether that's because it always takes a little while for the policy that data scientists are seeing to feel it in our pocket, or if it's this rhetoric that we see online about how divided we are and how Americans have never felt more fear and anger in their political system.
That doesn't sound like very good news for Kamala Harris.
I think she's also tapping into, of course, there's anger. I think there's a lot of women that are also feeling like, we can't risk our lives with another Trump presidency. There's a lot of anger in minority communities about some of the language that Trump has used. I think on the whole, it's not good for America, but I do think her shift to joy will do her well on election day because people want to vote for something, not just against something.
Speaking of voting, more than 80 million people have already cast their ballots. Does this early voting give us any clues as to what we can expect on election day?
Yes and no. It's hard to compare it to the last election because it was the pandemic election. And so early voting and mail-in voting was kind of the main way to do it. That said, based on historical trends, early voting tends to favor Democrats because they have a ground game. With that said, right now, just Democrats, Republicans. Democrats are leading in swing states, but by a smaller margin than they did in 2020. So that is a sign that would give the campaign pause, except exit polling from these have said that Harris is leading. So we can dice that a lot of ways and say maybe people aren't voting straight party in this early mail-in voting. There's a lot of trying to read the tea leaves right now about what this early voting means.
Now, polls also indicate that this is a very close race. How could the turnout patterns on voting day still affect the final result?
I think that's, to quote Trump, the whole ball of wax. It's going to be, can you get every last supporter that is on your side to the doors, to the polls? Because it will be all about turnout, and it'll be about Democrats maintaining that smaller margin that they've already established in the early voting and Trump's team overtaking it. So it'll be about, in Pennsylvania in 2020, it came down to 80,000 votes, and in 2016, it came down to 40,000 votes. And that is an incredibly small margin that we can expect again tomorrow.
We'll leave it there for the moment, but thanks so much for your time today. Political analyst Liz Schulke speaking to us from Baltimore. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, DW's chief international editor Richard Walker is in Florida, in Palm Beach, in fact, where Donald Trump will hold his election night party. I asked him earlier if either candidate had more momentum entering election day.
Yeah, so Stephen, I'm just going to explain a little bit, first of all, where we are. So yeah, we're in Palm Beach, and we've come to a flag waving, and as you can see, everybody's got their flags out. This is for the local Republican Party group in this town, have come down to this intersection to show their support for Donald Trump. And you can hear the honking of car horns in the background. They've definitely been getting a lot of support from a lot of the cars driving past here. One car even circling around twice to keep honking his horn further. So a lot of enthusiasm on this very street corner for Donald.
Welcome back to Patrick Christie's tonight. Now, Americans will head to the polls in just a matter of hours as the final day of campaigning wraps up this evening. Both candidates pulled out all the stops in a last-ditch attempt to win some voters. Kamala Harris spent a day in Pennsylvania, the battleground state which is expected to determine the outcome of the election. Meanwhile, Trump is holding rallies in North Carolina, Pennsylvania and Michigan today. Now, this happened just an hour or so ago.
You have a man from Europe, I don't know if he's here, I saw him backstage. What he did was, and what he is doing is sort of what we did a few years ago. He's doing a great job. He's always been my friend for some reason. He liked me, I liked him. And he's shaking it up pretty good over there. He was the big winner of the last election in the UK, and he's a very spectacular man, very highly respected, Nigel Farage. He's a little bit of a rebel, but that's good. You know, that's good. Don't change, Nigel.
Well, that man there is my next guest, the Reform UK leader and MP for Clacton, Nigel Farage. Nigel, congratulations, another shout out. There you go. So where are you now? What's the mood like on the ground?
I'm now in the Peanut Bar in downtown Reading in Pennsylvania. Look, you know, looking at the numbers, looking at the early voting, I still think there's absolutely every reason to believe that Trump's going to win this. I'm not saying it'll be by a big margin, but I do believe that he is going to win this. There's a lot more energy in the Trump campaign than there is in the Harris campaign. Of that, I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever. And just think about this. You know, Trump is 78. That rally we were just at was the second of 4 that he's doing today. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of work and energy the Republicans are putting into this. No, I firmly believe he's going to win.
You have said, I believe, Nigel, that if he doesn't, he shouldn't blame the polls, he shouldn't cause any kind of ruckus, because there is maybe a little bit of a fear about that.
Well, look, I think the front page of a Telegraph tomorrow is somewhat ridiculous, frankly. I mean, I like the newspaper, but I said if he loses decisively, yes, he can go to Turnberry and play golf. But I did say it's hypothetical because I believe he is going to win.
And presumably you think that would be the best thing for Britain, because Kamala Harris and the Democrats, etc., could be worse in terms of them looking maybe more to the EU.
Oh. Look, the Democrats don't give a damn about Britain. They consider us to be an irrelevancy. They'd much rather look towards Brussels with everything, or indeed, at times, some of the more extreme shades of Irish nationalism. Trump is a genuine friend of our country. He wants to do a trade deal. He'd always wanted to do a trade deal with the linchpins of NATO. We share intelligence at a very high level. And it is, if Trump does win, as I believe, it's very important. This Labour government has as good a relationship with Trump as they possibly can.
The last election, I believe you put a bet on, Nigel. Have you put any money on this one?
I haven't actually. I should have done. I really should have. Patrick, you just reminded me. I might go and put a substantial bet on Trump right now.
You might right now. Okay. Well, God, are we allowed to know the figure, Nigel? You're just plucking this out in there, are you? But are we allowed to know the figure?
Well, after a long day, let me have a drink and think about it.
Drink and think. All right. Yeah. Okay. Look, Nigel, just what I've got you. So Trump is pretty confident, obviously. Yeah. What's at stake here, right? Because a lot of people look to America as, well, really the leader of the free world in a sense. And it's a very, very chaotic world. We've got what's going on with Ukraine. We've got the potential for China saber rattling, the Middle East issues as well. So what is at stake here?
Well, you're right. I mean, you know, America's voting for the leader of the free world. We're at a time, we've never been closer to war in the entirety of my life. What is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Ukraine, what may happen, and is likely to happen in Taiwan. So America needs a strong leader. We need, frankly, a strong leader of NATO. We need somebody who is inclined towards peace, not war. It was Trump's administration that signed the Abraham Accords, that got Arab countries and Israel together. It was Biden who removed the last troops from Afghanistan that led to the Taliban coming back, that led to Putin invading Ukraine. China now sees a very weak American leader. We all need a strong American leader. Yeah, carry a big stick, by all means, but have in your mind you'd rather have peace than war. And that's what Trump represents, and goodness me, that very badly.
Okay, just one last one with you, Nigel. You might have seen this, okay? There's a group that I'm sure you hold dear to your heart called Led by Donkeys. Now, they have got a billboard in your constituency at the moment that says the amount of money that you have allegedly made from second jobs, etc. They've just asked an hour ago, they said, hard at work for the people of Clacton again, Nigel. What would you say to them? Because they do seem quite obsessed with you.
Look, they're an extreme left-wing group. They will fight me all the way. I'll be condemned and criticised for whatever I do. I have to say, I had a very busy day campaigning in Clacton on Saturday, and everywhere I went, the reception was very, very positive. We're doing our best with me as MP and my support group to help pensioners get onto pension credit so they can get their winter fuel allowance. And you know what? Unlike all the other MPs, I work 7 days a week, often hours you wouldn't even dream of. I have no conscience about this at all. I know what I'm doing.
Nigel, thank you very, very much. And, you know, just to testify that, he's made time for this show this evening. So there we go. Nigel Farage there from the Peanut Bar in America. Good luck. Take care. That's Nigel Farage. He's Reform UK leader and MP for Clacton. Thank you for your time this evening.
It's one day to go until the United States electorate chooses its next president. And our very own Tim Stanley has made an excellent case for Donald Trump in today's Telegraph. And he's now with me as part of my panel, along with author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Well, Tim, let me hand over to you. What is the case for Trump, the reasonable, moderate case for Trump?
Let's defend the indefensible. Well, look, if he does win, it's because he's polling slightly better than he did in 2016. So how can it be that 8 years after January the 6th and all the court cases, this man might still be capable of re-winning the presidency? Well, it's partly because people do have experience of him in office. They know that when he was president, there was no war, that wages rose in advance of inflation, and that unemployment and poverty rates, particularly for ethnic minorities, hit historic lows. And if a significant number of men of colour vote for him, that's probably why. Now, you'll counter to that and say, but come on, Hitler built the Autobahn and Mussolini made the trains run on time. You can be good at running an economy and still be profoundly immoral. But what I'd argue is that for every supposedly extreme position Trump takes, I can find something in his record which counters that. So he's a religious bigot. Well, this is a religious bigot who appointed openly gay ambassadors and appointed someone to campaign for the decriminalisation of homosexuality, who handed out HIV prevention drugs. You might say that Donald Trump is some sort of authoritarian. Okay, but this is the first president in history to have audited the Pentagon. And likewise, for everything extreme that he did, I can usually find a democratic equivalent. And it's striking how many policies Donald Trump follows that the Democrats have then copied. So the classic one is the borders. He is famous for being tough on the borders. Joe Biden took over and initially went soft on the borders. Then there was a large movement of people, so he reversed that policy. And Joe Biden deported during his time in office over 2 million people. He placed tariffs on China. He withdrew troops from Afghanistan. Even if Trump loses tomorrow, Trumpism seems to have been endorsed by the American people.
Amy, so he's basically just misunderstood. He's a decent chap doing good
I'm not saying that.
And he's misunderstood by the liberal media.
So when I read Tim's piece, I did feel vaguely reassured for about 5 seconds, and I actually considered what it was like when he was in office for some of the sections of society that you mentioned. So the ones that struck me the most was migrant rights, and I had images of the horrendous deportation centres when children were separated from their families at the border. That was very much Trump with the cages, with the children. Then I considered women, the reversal of Roe versus Wade, and I thought I can't, as a having a womb.
But that merely reverted it to the states. It said it's, and that's quite clear.
Endangering millions of women.
No. Not the judgment of Roe v. Wade has not made abortion illegal in the United States.
I understand that,
it's merely
but
enforced.
It has changed abortion
the
laws.
10th article of the Bill of Rights,
for example,
which is
in
any
the state
matter.
of Idaho now, you cannot have access to an abortion, and women are dying. Women are dying because they cannot move state quick enough to access that healthcare. So just on that basis alone.
Also, whenever there has been a public vote on abortion, people have voted actually to liberalise the laws, and there are some states which have extreme laws the other way, which
and there
allow
are
it
other
up to
states.
birth.
I think it was 7 different states that the laws reversed after.
Right. Either way, I want to throw in, it's important to note that Donald Trump is opposed to a nationwide abortion ban. So Donald Trump's position is not that of what Idaho has done.
He hasn't been completely straight with that. We're not completely sure where he would go with that. And he has gone on record and says things that are very concerning, such as women who have abortions should be punished. That is deeply concerning to anyone who
Well, in
cares
this
about
country, a woman who
rights.
procures abortion through the post is punished for it. She faces criminal sanction for it.
Jacob,
It's not an
you
unusual.
said the woman could just have the baby.
Yes.
There have been cases in America of women carrying ectopic pregnancies. The risk to their lives is huge.
Yeah.
They will probably die as a result of trying to carry that baby because of laws such as what we see in Idaho.
Right, but you see, this is the thing. We're getting sucked into one issue,
Let me go on
which
another
Europeans look at and they're just horrified. What they don't necessarily appreciate is that America, under him, moved towards a patchwork of abortion laws, which is exactly what they have
Shall
in
we
Europe.
go on one that will affect us and our special relationship? What about the tariffs that he plans to impose, the economic
You threatened
protectionism?
tariffs before and you didn't impose
that
any
will
on us.
impact.
I was going to ask you. Really? Copycat? Wow, so good, so special. Do you have...
Let's talk to Jennifer Ewing from Republicans Overseas, though, because we want to find out from her how exciting it's going to be tonight. Jennifer, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Let's have a look, first of all, before we begin, with Donald Trump, who was speaking quite late last night. In fact, when we started the show, he was still speaking in Michigan, talking about God.
But just a few months ago, in a beautiful field in Pennsylvania, an assassin tried to stop our great movement, greatest movement in history. But that brushed with death. did not stop us by any means. It only made us more determined to finish the job that we had only just started. That was not a pleasant day, I will tell you. That was not a pleasant day. But many people say that God saved me in order to save America. Many people, I've seen it so many times.
Donald Trump there saying it was a very unpleasant day. I mean, we forget, I suppose, Jennifer, because the media in America kind of played it down to such an extent that somebody tried to kill him.
Yeah, it's been memory holes, hasn't it? And not just once, but twice.
Yeah.
Remember, there was another assassination attempt after that.
Yeah, but the first guy actually managed to fire a bullet at him.
Yes, of course,
Yeah.
of course. And, you know, that was crazy. And it was on the front pages for a few days and then it's gone. And there's been, you know, a few people lost their jobs, but really not much has happened. So, yeah, I think they thought somehow this worked in his favor because his reaction was quite strong. You know, that iconic photo of him standing up afterwards with his fist in the air saying, fight, fight, fight.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the comments, as you've just said, that, you know, there, but, you know, for the grace of God, he's with us. And I think a lot of people do feel that way. You know, in America, we like our God and ironically our guns as well with the Second Amendment. So, no, it's not surprising that he would be saying something like that the last night in Michigan.
No, of course. And what are you hearing from the US in terms of, you know, the final push, as it were? The voting, obviously, and the voting sort of in numbers is important. There's been a lot of early voting done. There's been a lot of mail-in voting done as well. What are you hearing?
Yeah, that's true. So just so your listeners know, we've had about 78 million people vote early, which is, you know, an extraordinary large
It's a
amount.
lot bigger than normal, isn't it?
It is. And part of that is because you'll remember in 2020, Donald Trump mistakenly said, don't early vote, don't do the mail-in ballots, go on the day. And this year, they totally learned from their mistakes and learned from, quite frankly, how well the Democrats are at getting out the early vote. So they told people to vote early. And people have come out. Now, whether or not that will cannibalize the vote on the day, we won't know until people get out and vote tonight. But that could be said, same thing on the Democrat side. You know, they're saying tons of women have come out and vote. That could also cannibalize their on the day voting.
Yeah, OK. Let's have a look at what Donald Trump said in the sort of last thing in Michigan.
But we don't have to settle for weakness and incompetence and decline and decay. That's a nice word, decay. That's what's happened. That's a nice word, decay. Can you imagine? And nobody will question it because it's true. With your vote tomorrow, we can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America and lead the world to new heights of glory.
How confident are the Republicans today, shall we say? Because so much depends upon, as you say, the numbers of people that get out to vote, the places where they go out to vote. I hear it's too close to call, but I also hear it could be a kind of a hidden landslide that we haven't really quite prepared for.
Well, look, let's hope it is a hidden landslide. Obviously, I'm biased. I want Trump to win. But even if he does not win, I hope it's a landslide on the other side. So we have a decisive mandate on one side or the other. But you're right. The polls are incredibly close. There were a few outliers over the weekend. You had Iowa, what went in Kamala Harris's favor. But you then had Emerson that went up Trump, 10 points in that. So too close to call. Most of them within the margin of error. So it all depends on turnout. However, the momentum is without a doubt in Trump's favor. You'll see last night, Joe Rogan, with over 30 million viewers, came out and backed him. Yeah. His main reason was really, censorship. And he was speaking to Elon, and censorship was a big issue, as you'll recall, in the U.S. 2020 presidential election. A lot of things had been suppressed. And this time we're hearing, more honest. I mean, there's still a little bit of, cutting clips and everything. But for the most part, there's less, I'd like to say, censorship going into this election.
Well, yeah, there is. And Elon Musk, of course, as you say, very, very strong on that. Let's have a look at what he had to say last night on Joe Rogan's show.
If the Dems win this election, they will legalize enough illegals to turn the swing states, and everywhere will be like California. There will be no escape.
That's so insane.
This is the final. This is it. This is the last chance.
Has anybody tried
and
to
I
push
just want
back?
to go out and vote. Vote like your life depends on it. Vote like your future depends on it, because it does. This is the last chance, man.
I mean, it really is one of the biggest elections I think I've ever seen and ever covered in my, long and checkered career sitting here. I'm reminded by Dale from Cambridge. He says, talking about the US election, I remember listening to your early morning show last election, where I remember you saying it really isn't looking good for Joe Biden. Filled me with some hope hearing that, but then we saw more and more of the states go blue. Please don't jinx it again this time. I didn't really jinx it. The point is that I remember speaking last time around about 2 a.m. to Nigel Farage, who was in the White House, actually, with Donald Trump, who at that point was like everybody else, assuming that the numbers looked like Donald Trump had actually won. And of course, Donald Trump's people ever since then have said, well, he kind of did win. It's just that they stole it from him because he did actually get more votes than he got in 2016, and he still lost. He got 80 million votes, and he still lost to Joe Biden, which a lot of people have found very difficult to swallow. And I'm not saying that it was stolen from him. I'm not saying that, but that's what they said.
You're right. There have been a lot of people who have said that, and whether you believe that or not, the good thing is the Republicans have, as we like to say in the U.S., lawyered up, and they've got a before, during, and after plan to just maintain the integrity of these elections. So something like that, is closely watched. Now, just quickly on Elon's comment, he's not wrong. I mean, why else would the second Biden and Harris get into office? Would they rip up Trump's very effective border policies to prevent illegal people from coming through the border? The only reason is they're trying to change sort of the electoral layout of the country, and it's a big risk. And as much as I love my home state of California, it is a lesson in perhaps progressive leftist policies gone wrong.
Right. And is it likely that I've read a lot about it, but I haven't read anything definitive that it's going to have an effect, that some of these illegal migrants aren't being given the vote?
Well, we know in my home state of California, they signed a law saying it was illegal for even local counties to require photo ID when you show up to vote, which why would you do that? And they're claiming it's racist and all these sorts of things. So all you have to do is go watch interviews with people who are minorities, and they find that notion that they don't have ID quite insulting. So, as we know, Mike, we need ID for everything else, and certainly not advocating digital ID, but, showing a driver's license when you go to vote, that's a good idea.
Well, also in this country, you can't vote unless your name's on the electoral roll. I mean, you don't necessarily have to prove that you're that person, but, do you not even have to have a name on an electoral roll to vote in the US?
P.F. Chang's is hosting a chef's feast. You can get a 3-course meal starting at under $20 per person. Find craveable lettuce wraps and a full menu of flavors to celebrate with friends, family, everyone. Come see why we're America's #1 Asian bistro.
Socrates in the City, conversations on the examined.
As an election, basically, you could register on that day and then early vote. So I don't know, did they ask for a driving license? I'm not sure they did. The other thing we had, and thankfully, Virginia fought back against it, but Virginia found that over 1,600 people who had self-identified as non-citizens were allowed on the voter roll. And the government of Virginia, not the governor, but the certain courts wanted to keep those people on. Well, those people themselves had said they were illegal. So in the end, Virginia won, so we got those people off the roll. But another incident of an illegal Chinese man who got caught voting illegally. And then they said, well, we've got to count your vote because it's already been accepted, which is insane.
It is insane, isn't it? So we've got, I think, Donald Trump tonight in Mar-a-Lago. He's going to be watching the result anxiously, I dare say, from his home in Florida. Kamala Harris, is she going to be in the White House with Tim Walz?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not sure of their plans. I would imagine they are, or sometimes they get a hotel. So it completely depends. I wasn't invited to that party.
No, quite. But I am under the impression that Washington, D.C. is being boarded up and is going to have National Guard people around and about in the city just in case there's any trouble.
Yeah, I think I've heard that as well. I think they started to do that last time, too. I mean, remember the 2020 election came after that terrible summer we had of all those Antifa, far-left, BLM protests. So, yeah, unfortunately, we live in a world where a lot of these federal buildings do need to get boarded up on big days like this.
Yeah. And what's your prediction for tonight, Jennifer? I know it's a difficult one to call, but what do you think will happen?
I think President Trump will win again. And I hope he wins by a landslide for obvious reasons. But the faster we know tonight, the better. The one state I'd say to look out for is probably Virginia. Yeah. They come in early. It did go for Biden and Clinton prior to that. But if we're going to see some sort of a shift, that's the one to look out for. But, the big number is 270. So once we get there, we're done.
Yeah.
How crucial is it for the US, the UK, and the world in whatever order you choose, Nigel Farage?
Well, I'm going to do it in reverse order like as well. I think it actually really matters. I can't think, Nick, at any point in your lifetime or mine, and we're getting a bit long in the tooth, when the world's ever been facing a more potentially dangerous situation. The Middle East, Ukraine, goodness knows what may happen in Taiwan. What you've seen over the last 4 years are dictators taking advantage of a weak American president. It all began with the withdrawal from Afghanistan. That was the signal to Putin. The West weak. He went into Ukraine. And I do think, even his biggest critics will admit that things like the Abraham Accords that Trump put together were remarkable foreign policy achievements. So I think for world peace and stability, having an American president that tyrants fear just a bit, or make things unpredictable just a bit, is a good thing.
You're close to him. When you last spoke with him, how was his mood?
Pretty good. I mean, given there were 2 assassination attempts in the space of a few weeks, and that's not easy. to get over. I've been through a couple of near-death experiences myself, and you don't just wake up the next morning and say, hey, you know what, everything's fine. I think the way he's recovered is remarkable. What I've really enjoyed, Nick, is, and I've said this to you before, that in private, he's a great raconteur. He's a great joke teller. He's really very funny. And we've never seen that in public. The last few weeks we have. Jokes he's been telling, the dust cart, turning up with the dustman's top on, saying it makes me look thinner. All that side of it makes him look a lot more human.
How damaging was the garbage gag?
Just very, very unhelpful. Yet comedians are very dangerous when you get them on a political platform. And of course, Trump didn't book him, Trump didn't know him, but it did do harm.
And the line of fire for Liz Cheney, the line of fire for the media. Did you get what he was trying to say, or are these as irresponsible as many would say, Nigel Farage?
Well, look, anything he says gets twisted out of proportion. I mean, hey, it was Biden himself who said we need to put Trump in the crosshairs. So I think, both sides of a divide in America need to be slightly more careful with the rhetoric they use. I just hope for the last 24 hours that Donald stays on two very simple messages. One is the cost of living, which has rocketed over the course of the last 4 years. And I genuinely think, with an energy boom, he can bring many of those prices down. And boy, aren't there lessons for us in the UK on that? And secondly, the border. 10 to 15 million illegal immigrants have come into America over the last few years. If Trump just sticks on those messages, I still believe he'll win.
Are you speaking here? We're very noisy. Are you speaking here at this rally?
No, I'm not. I've kind of not pushed myself forward in quite the way I did in the previous campaigns, partly because of what the Labour Party have done.
But folk recognise you. When I got out of the car behind you, people know you straight away. Why do you suppose that is, Nigel?
Well, I've spent loads of time in America. I've done lots of stuff on Fox and Newsmax and even CNN and MSNBC on certain days. So, yeah, I'm quite a known quantity here. Also, don't underestimate the impact that Brexit had in America. It was a big deal in America. And I think in many ways, I'm not even sure Trump would have won in 2016 without that bow wave that Brexit created.
Who wins?
I'm staying with Trump. You've seen an Iowa poll out over the weekend.
How much credence do you give that one? That if he loses Iowa, he won that even on the one he lost, the election he lost, Nigel Farage.
Yeah, that's right. It reminds me of Brexit Day, June the 23rd, 2016, when a poll came out from a so-called reputable UK polling company showing Remain 10 points ahead. And guess what? The guy that produced that poll is now in the House of Lords. That is what they do. They're trying to cast doubts in the minds of Trump voters. They're trying to say, look, you know what? You're not going to win. You can stay at home. I don't believe any of it.
If he were to lose, do we get a lot of rich lawyers? Do you see legal challenges for days, weeks, months?
Well, I just...
He's not a gracious loser, Nigel Farage.
No, but also they have a terrible system here. You and I remember the 2000 election, which came to dimple chads and hanging chads on a piece of paper in Florida. And that finished up in the Florida court, the National Supreme Court. So there's nothing new in legal challenges in America. What amazes me is for the #1 leading nation in the world that is so good at tech and so many things, they can't run elections that Americans can trust.
Last couple of questions. How would you rate President Biden's 4 years?
Catastrophic.
How would you rate Kamala Harris's campaign and potential presidency?
Her vice presidency, nil point. And was terrible. I mean, look, she was the border czar. Didn't even visit the place for the first 3 years, and then denied she had responsibility. I think she's a terrible candidate.
Let's come back finally to UK politics. We're speaking hours after we've heard the appointment of some of Kemi Badenoch's shadow cabinet. That's only an hour or so ago. Your reaction to that from what you've heard so far?
The Remainers are back in town. There's going to be no change whatsoever. She is a continuity candidate with all the influences of Michael Gove and all the gang in 10 Downing Street, and somehow she thinks miraculously she can bring them together. There are two parties within the Conservative Party. You've got the Reform-minded people and the Liberal Democrat-minded people, and they are so far apart, it's not true.
What might the impact be for the Reform UK Party?
Seeing it already. We've gone through 95,000 members this morning, so we've gone up 1,500 in the last 3 or 4 days, and these are Conservatives who are hanging on to see whether the party can change direction. Now, for us as a party, it's very good news.
Last week's budget from Rachel Reeves?
Just an attack on aspiration. Do you know, I went to a farm in Essex at the weekend, a 300-acre farm, third generation, kids they were hoping to pass it on to for the fourth, and frankly, the estate and the machinery is probably worth 5 or 6 million quid in today's money. So on paper you can say they're rich. Their income's tiny. They couldn't possibly pay a bill of £1 million inheritance tax. I think it's a disastrous mistake. And generally, when governments U-turn, we scream U-turn, U-turn. But in this case, she needs to U-turn, or the family farm in Britain will be destroyed.